Hello and welcome to the third and final part of this crash course guide for the musculoskeletal system. In previous videos we've taken a look at some of the basic principles of the musculoskeletal system, as well as some of the muscles and skull and vertebral column that are involved within it. Today we're going to be taking a look at bone and calcium and phosphate metabolism, as well as what are muscle, cartilage and ligaments and where are they in this vast and big system. So let's start by thinking about bone. What's really important is that bone doesn't just stay as bone for good, it's constantly remodelling. And it's important that you understand what cells are involved in this process. So there are three really important cells that you need to know about. So, osteoclasts first of all. These are multinucleated cells and they're responsible for bone resorption, i.e. bone destroyal. They travel to the sites of old bone or the bones which need to be repaired, and they secrete acid phosphatase which disintegrate the bone. So if we're getting rid of bone, we need something to balance that out. So we have osteoblasts, and these are mononucleated cells, as opposed to osteoclasts, which are multinucleated. Osteoblasts help in the formation of new bone, so they secrete alkaline phosphate, which helps in the deposition of calcium and phosphate, resulting in the formation of new bone. So bone remodeling is a balance between osteoclastic and osteoblastic activity, and you'll see this in diagram form on the next slide. So what are osteocytes? So osteoblasts which are not present on the surface of bone are called osteocytes, and they're found in the lacunae between the lamella in a bone. So remember that structure of bone we looked at the start. If you look at that in more detail, you'll see the lacunae, and in there you'll see osteocytes, and these cells help in maintaining oxygen and mineral level within the bone. This is what we're talking about when we're thinking about the remodeling cycle. And what we can see here is we've got osteoclast activity in bone resorption, and then we've got osteoblastic activity in bone formation, and then eventually we have this resting phase where we have the new bone present. This is what it looks like from a cross-sectional point of view, but this really is a clearer representation. So we have, for example, bone resorption, bone formation, and then new bone formed and the resting state. Next we'll talk about calcium and phosphate metabolism, and this was covered in the endocrine system as well. So if you're pretty familiar with this, feel free to skip ahead. So calcium and phosphate metabolism is all about negative feedback. So as levels of substances fall, the body must find a way to bring that level back up again, and vice versa. So it's all about a stimulus being detected by a sensor or a control, and then an action occurring in order to cause an effect. And that's a simple negative feedback loop. So let's think about calcium first. It's really important that we maintain blood calcium concentrations within a tight normal range, and deviations above or below this normal range can lead to serious disease. So hypocalcemia refers to low blood calcium levels, and hypercalcemia indicates a high blood calcium level. So remember, those phrases hypo and hyper are general terms in medicine for low and too high. So it's critical to maintain blood calcium within that tight normal range, as we've already said there. But where is this calcium? Well, there's several locations for calcium, so it could be intracellular, and this is where a large majority of calcium within cells is found in mitochondria and endoplasmic reticulum. Calcium in blood and extracellular fluid, around half of calcium in blood is bound to proteins, and the concentration of phosphate in blood is essentially identical to that of calcium. There's a learning point to remember there. But bone calcium. A vast majority of body calcium is in bone, and within bone 99% of the calcium is tied up in the mineral phase. But the remaining 1% is in a pool that can be rapidly exchanged with extracellular calcium, so the input and output of calcium. So what happens when we've not got enough? Well, we need to increase the levels, and this is a table nicely summarising what would happen if we have too low levels of calcium. And we increase the calcium by releasing PTH, so parathyroid hormone, from the parathyroid glands on the back of the thyroid in the neck, and PTH leads to increased bone resorption. So remember, bone resorption occurs due to osteoclasts. Bone resorption is the disintegration of bone, and if you break down bone, it's going to increase the blood calcium because it's taking calcium out of the bone and putting it into the blood. We can also increase our calcium and phosphate reabsorption from the kidneys, as well as increasing calcium reabsorption from the gut. In addition, we can convert inactive form of vitamin D to active vitamin D, which will then continue down a pathway to increase calcium levels as well. So as we think about here, we must convert inactive forms of vitamin D into active vitamin D, because active vitamin D reinforces those things. So it increases bone resorption. It increases absorption of dietary calcium and phosphorus. So therefore it's really important that we have active vitamin D as well in order to increase our calcium levels. Now vitamin D, thinking broadly, comes from several different sources. But when we get vitamin D, it's in the inactive form, and therefore our bodies need to work really hard to activate it. So, sunlight hits our skin, or equally we eat fish, milk and eggs, and these are our two sources of vitamin D for the body. So vitamin D3, the inactive form, such as cholecalciferol is what it's called, that travels to the liver. So we get this inactive form, cholecalciferol of vitamin D3, from our sun and from fish, milk and eggs, and this goes to the liver. When in the liver, it is stationary there, and 25 hydroxylase from the blood acts upon it. As a result, the output there is cholecalciferol is converted into 25 hydroxy D. This is also called calcidiol. So remember, this is also inactive at this point, and calcidiol travels to the kidneys. So we've come into the body, gone to the liver, and now we're going to the kidneys. Calcidiol, 25 hydroxy D, is present in the kidney. Now PTH is released from the parathyroid gland, as we told you before, in response to low calcium levels. PTH becomes 1-alpha hydroxylase and then acts upon the calcidiol. Calcidiol then becomes 125 hydroxy squared D, and this is now calcitriol. But this is now the active form. This is the form that we've been looking for the calcitriol form. And this is exactly the same thing, just in a different diagram. Alternatively, we can have too much calcium. And in these cases, we need to decrease the calcium levels. And again, this is summarized in this table here as to how we might do this. So, for example, how we secreted PTH before, we're now going to inhibit the secretion of PTH. But instead, we're going to secrete something called calcitonin. And calcitonin is released from the parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland, also in the neck. Calcitonin causes promotion of the transfer of calcium from the blood into bone. So it promotes osteoblastic activity. In other words, to take up that calcium from the blood and put it into the bone. It inhibits reabsorption of calcium and phosphate in the kidneys. So it decreases the content of calcium and phosphate in the blood due to its excretion in urine. It excretes more calcium in urine. And an obvious factor here, as we've already said, PTH is inhibited, because PTH would do the opposite of what we want. Having talked about calcium, now let's think about phosphorus, and this is an important role in cellular metabolism, and it's a source of energy as well in cellular reactions. It's also found in membranes, so hypo and hyperphosphatemia refer to the low and high levels in blood concentration. How is bone important in all of this? Well, we've said bone is constantly regenerating, and we've got these osteoclasts and osteoblasts which are breaking down and forming bone. And as we've said, calcium is stored in bone. So common sense here says if we're having osteoclastic activity, it's taking calcium from the bone into the blood and therefore increasing serum calcium levels. And calcitonin is going to do the opposite. Next in this video I said we'd take a look at cartilage, muscle and ligament and what they are and what they do. So there are three types of cartilage. Hyaline cartilage, which is the most common, found in our ribs, nose, larynx and trachea, and it's a precursor of bone as well. There's also fibrocartilage, and this is found in the IV discs, in joint capsules and ligaments. And then we've got elastic cartilage, which is found in the external layer, epiglottis and larynx, and this is the least common type of cartilage. Let's have a look at them in a little bit more detail. Well, hyaline cartilage has widely dispersed fine collagen fibres, which are type 2 collagen, which strengthen it, so it's got good strength. And therefore collagen fibres are hard to see in the sections. It's got a perichondrium, and like we said, it's the weakest of the three types of cartilage there. This is looking down a microscope so we can see the chondrocytes. Remember earlier in the video we said chondrocytes have a precursor cell of cartilage. And we've got nucleus located within the cells in the lacunae. Next we have fibrocartilage, and this is the strongest kind of cartilage because it's got alternating layers of hyaline cartilage matrix and thick layers of dense collagen fibres. And we can see in the structure here, it looks all kind of tangled up and functionally distressed, and therefore because of that it's got really good strength. And this type of cartilage does not have a perichondrium because it's usually a transitional layer between hyaline cartilage and a tendon or ligament. And finally, we have elastic cartilage, like we said, the least common form of cartilage, and the chondrocytes are found in thread-like networks here of elastic fibers within the matrix. Elastic cartilage provides strength and elasticity, and maintains the shape of certain structures such as the external ear, and this type of cartilage does have a perichondrium. Next, we should think about ligaments. So ligament is a tough fibrous band of connective tissue that serves to support the internal organs and hold bones together in proper articulations of the joint. So there are two major types of ligament, and they're white ligaments and yellow ligaments. Remember, a joint's ligaments form a capsular sac that enclose the articulating bone ends and the synovial membrane, in other words, the two ends of bone that are communicating with each other. And sometimes the structures include a recess or pouch lined by synovial tissue, and this is what we call a bursa. Finally, let's think about muscle. So there are three types of muscle, as we said earlier in this video. There's skeletal muscle, which attaches to and moves bones by contracting and relaxing in response to voluntary messages from the nervous system. So remember, skeletal muscle is under voluntary control. It's composed of long cells called muscle fibers that have got a striated appearance. And it's organised into bundles which are supplied by blood vessels and innervated by motor neurons. So key features of skeletal muscle are that it's striated and are that it's under voluntary control. Next, we have smooth muscle. This is found in the walls of hollow organs throughout the body, and this responds to involuntary movements triggered by impulses travelling through the autonomic nervous system of our bodies. The smooth muscle in the walls of organs like the urinary bladder, for example, and uterus, allow them to expand and relax. And artery walls also contain smooth muscle that relax and contract to move blood through the body, in line with vasoconstriction and vasodilation, for example. Finally, we have cardiac muscle. No clues for guessing where it is. It's in the heart, but more specifically, it's in the middle layer of the three walls surrounding the heart. It's in the myocardium, and it's responsible for the heart's pumping action. So cardiac muscle found to make the heart beat, of course, only in the myocardium, contracts in response to signals from the cardiac conduction. And cardiac muscle is made from cells called cardiomyocytes, and these cardiomyocytes also have a striated appearance like skeletal muscle, but their overall structure is shorter and thicker, whereas if you remember, the skeletal muscle were longer and thin. So to conclude, let's see what you've learned. These were questions we asked at the start. First of all, about the pterion and which bones form the pterion. The correct answer here is frontal, parietal, temporal and sphenoidal, and remember that's the point where your middle meningeal artery is, and that could rupture in trauma. Question 2, what nerve is responsible for innervating the anterior compartment of the upper arm? Hopefully now you know this is the musculocutaneous nerve, innervating those three muscles up there, B, B and C. And question 3, what is the active form of vitamin D? And hopefully from this video you remember that it is calcitriol. And remember that vitamin D undergoes as many changes from the liver to the kidney in order to become active. Let's try 2 harder MCQs now. So question 1, what cells do connective tissue form from? The answer here is fibroblasts. So connective tissue is one of the 4 basic types of animal tissue, along with epithelial tissue, muscle tissue and nervous tissue. And finally, this question here, what type of muscle is shown in the image? Hopefully you will recognise this as cardiac muscle, thick, striated muscle that is short in nature and heavily nucleated. And that's everything for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to contact me. And thank you very much once again.